Okay, I've got a good one for you today, and it's something that has been extraordinarily helpful to me over the years. My coach many years ago taught me this one, and it's really been helpful, and I hope by sharing it with you, it'll be helpful to you. So it's called Mosquitos, Rodents, and Black Swans, and that might make you kind of interested just by the title alone, but here we go. What are mosquitoes, rodents, and black swans, and why does it matter to you? So let's look at them. I know you can see the mosquito and the rodent, and you can barely see the black swan, but let me explain what those three are in the context of you and what you're dealing with. So, mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are minor nuisances that distract and drain your energy, but sometimes carry serious diseases with them. And when you think about your business, when you think about the stuff that's happening in your business, there are those things that are distracting and they're nuisances, and you got to swat them, and they're there, and they bug you. And I'm going to explain a bit more of that, but know that my guess is if you're anything like me, you have those things that just live in your business, and they're nuisance, and they're constantly there. And the problem with them is it's not that they're that big or that important to you in the grand scheme of things. The problem is they drain a ton of energy. And my guess is if you're anything like me and you've got mosquitoes in your life and business, they drain energy on a perpetual basis that then has an opportunity cost related to the other stuff that's more important in your business. And so we want to talk about mosquitoes today. Second are rodents. What are rodents? Rodents are vermin left unattended that will infest your business and eventually destroy your infrastructure. So vermin and rodents are those things hidden in the walls. You don't really see them, but they're doing damage. They don't seem all that important, but back in the walls, they're chewing away on the wires and the cables, and they're building nests, and they're eating out things behind the scenes. And you don't know what's happening, but it's there. And yet it's something that has a long-term impact on the very foundation of your business. The things that hold it all together, the things that make it work every day are stuck in the rodents that we're going to talk about. The third one are black swans. This comes from Talib's book, Nicola Talib, I think is his name, Anti-Fragile, where he talks about black swans as those rare and unpredictable events that you can't anticipate in advance, that are kind of cataclysmic, and they can do significant damage, and they're a product of the world you live in. And so we want to talk about the black swans that you might face in your business, and then how to deal with all of them. That's where I want to go today. So let's start with mosquitoes. And I think sometimes it's helpful to understand the different species of mosquitoes in your world. And remember, mosquitoes are those little nuisances that distract and drain your attention. So the first mosquito is the things that you tolerate on a regular basis. I tend to think about them as minor annoyances and nuisances. They just show up time and time again. They're the things that you go, oh, that's bugging me. That thing frustrates me so much. So, for example, you're working on your computer, and every time you do something, every time you go to open a program, you go through this hiccup that takes 10 minutes to resolve. And maybe it only happens once a month, and you have to restart your whole computer, or once a week, and you have to restart your computer, and it becomes a toleration. And so you just kind of accept it. Maybe it's another thing. Maybe every time you go to a file cabinet, and I know, do we still use file cabinets? Yes. But if you have a file cabinet and you go to that file cabinet and the thing you think is there is not there, and then you spend the next 10 minutes looking for it, that's a toleration. You find it. It's always somewhere. The way your phone operates, the way something happens. Let's imagine at your house, there's this coffee table that every time you walk through a room, you bang your knee on it. That's a toleration. It's not like, oh, this is the end of the world. But if you do that enough times and it keeps happening over and over again, it's like, okay, I'm tolerating this. I'm tolerating this annoyance and nuisance. That's a particular species of a mosquito. The next are incompletions. And incompletions are the things that you have on your to-do list that never get done. They just live in an incomplete state. They're things you feel an obligation to, they hang around, and those uncompleted tasks weigh on you. They're this energy drain. And every time you look at your to-do list, or every time you notice that undone thing in your office, in your house, in your garage, whatever it is, that incomplete, that's sitting there is an annoyance. Now, it's not taking out your business, it's not taking out your life, but it's just sitting there all the time being incomplete. And it weighs on you, and you feel like, I got to swat away that guilt all the time. That's an incomplete. Final one is a repeating problem. So a problem that just never stops happening. Is this close to a toleration? Yes. It is in one respect. The difference is you may have tried to fix it. You may have tried to solve it. You've done something, but it just keeps coming back. It comes back. It comes back. And so from that perspective, these three species of mosquitoes are constantly working on you. And they take energy. And the reason they take energy is because they're distracting. They're pulling your attention. They're causing an emotional reaction. Even though it's muted, it's there, and it has a cost to you. So what do we want to do? The goal is to eliminate as many of these mosquitoes and the various species of these as possible. So I'm going to tell you how to do that in a minute, but let's go on to the next two. Next is rodents, right? Vermin in the walls, attacking the infrastructure. So what are the species of those? Well, there's a couple of different species. The first one are unclear goals. One of the things I notice when I work with people is a lot of times there is a lack of clarity around the goals. And that to me is a rodent in your business. If you're not clear on where you're going, if you don't have a good idea of where you're headed, how do you know if you get there? A lot of times I see when people aren't clear on where they're going, they're just clear on where they don't want to be, they end up somewhere else. So a lot of times a species of rodent to me in terms of what happens when this particular type of rodent in the wall with unclear goals is you get where you're not heading, and that can be challenging. Second one is in poor employees. Right now, many of us are faced with this challenge. Many of the conversations I have on a daily basis are about people who are struggling with the employees they have. And so part of that is an element of it's a species of rodent because over time, that poor employee starts to impact the results of your business. It starts to impact the way your business operates. It starts to impact culture, and it's really important, which relates to this third species of rodent, which is an emergent culture. An emergent culture is a culture that is not managed or defined by you. It's one that grows. An emergent culture to me is a little bit like the culture that happens if you leave a bowl or a Rubbermaid jar or a thing in the back of the fridge, and it's an organic substance, and it starts growing some other thing, like it gets fuzz and green and stuff like that on it. That's an emergent culture. It's the thing that's happening at the back of the fridge, and it's often created by poor employees or employees that are not living up to the standards that you've set. Poor systems. If you don't have good systems in your business and the systems are poor, these will eventually cause infrastructure problems in your business. They will cause destruction of something when you have poor systems. And systems are all kinds of things. It could be your software systems. It could be the systems in terms of the technology systems, the actual, like how your phones operate, how your equipment operates, how your processes work. I mean, the systems of your business are the thing. If they're not working properly, they're going to create some infrastructure damage. Lack of quality standards is another species of rodent that is at work in the walls of your business. And so if you've got lack of quality standards and you just accept whatever shows up in terms of actions, activity, the way things are done, the way phones are answered, the way services are delivered, all of that becomes a lack of quality standards. And those become something that will eventually, given long enough and given enough time, will do some serious damage. And then finally, lack of operating plans. And by operating plans, I mean, how do you operate things? And this is a slightly different than systems. Systems to me are the toolkit and the related stuff. Operating plans are how you operate within those systems and within those toolkit. And so if you don't have operating plans on specific areas of your business, you might have a vision for where you're going, but if you don't have clear operating plans around it, that's going to impact you. So if you've got any of these species of rodent running around your business, and you're not aware of them being there, then you've got a problem. And so one final one, lack of performance measures. If you're not measuring performance in your business, and that's from your P&L statement to the balance sheet to your cash flow to the specific either leading or lagging indicators in your business, such as how many leads are we producing? How many opportunities does that create? How many sales do we get from the opportunities? What's our cost of that? How much does it cost to service a client? How much does it cost to do the business we do? What's our salary cap? All of those performance measures become something, if left unattended, begin to work in the walls. And a lot of times what I notice in people that I talk to is they may have 4 or 5 of these in good place, but because they focused all their attention on these particular things, they miss out on the fact that while they have dealt with the rodents in the walls, they've missed the fact that there's squirrels or raccoons nesting in the attic. And that particular way of thinking about it, recognizing rodents have different places they like to show up. And so if you're missing on some of these, then they're going to destroy something at some future date, and it's something to really think about. So what's the goal with rodents? Well, initially we got to eradicate the ones that are there, and then with rodents, you got to ensure they don't come back. You've got to put specific kinds of protection on the walls of your business to ensure they can't get back in. And so we're going to talk about how you can think about that. All right, black swans. These are those rare and unpredictable events. These are those big, nasty, gnarly things that you're not expecting. But there's some species of those too, and let's look at those. First, natural disasters. We're seeing more and more of this happen, from massive hurricanes in Florida recently to snow to all kinds of stuff that impacts people and businesses around the world. And a natural disaster can be so significant it becomes a black swan event to you. Economic issues, from what happened through the pandemic to what's happening in the current economy to the impact of interest rate hikes and employment issues, finding employees. These kind of economic issues are another version of a black swan. And if you're not fully prepared for the impact of what's going to happen with major economic changes, you're at risk. Security breach. Security breaches are big now, and while they're not natural or an economic issue, they are a massive issue to companies. I have clients who, even in the last few months, have had significant security breaches where their entire systems are shut down because of that breach, because of hackers taking over their systems and locking them out, and all kinds of funky stuff happens when you have security breaches. That's a potential black swan event that could literally take you out. Accidents. And I'm not talking just major ones. I'm talking ones that maybe relate to equipment. They maybe relate to a fire in your facility. These are the kind of things that, if you are unprepared for them, become a black swan event that can take you completely out. An unplanned death of a principal. To me, this is a massive thing that is a potential, and it may not be a death, it may be a significant illness of a principal in the business. And if that happens, that's a black swan kind of event. Another one is a key person loss. So many people, especially in the smaller end of the businesses I work with, have one person who is like the insider who has all the knowledge. And in small businesses, if something happens to that person, that one person, and I'm not talking about a principal, I'm talking about an employee, a staff member, but who has unusual access, history, knowledge, experience within the business. If something happens to them, either they leave, they take another job, they exit quickly, they get sick, they die, whatever happens there, this is a black swan event. And you go, well, I just lost an employee. The reality is that employee has too much knowledge, and that's why I consider them a key person and why I consider it a black swan event. All right, what's our goal with them? Well, if you're going to withstand a black swan event, something significant like each of these species that I've just described, you have to build a robustness to withstand that black swan event or that version of a black swan event, or you actually, done well, may have the ability to exploit the black swan event to grow your business, to thrive, to competitively beat your rivals in your particular business because of your robustness. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to build that robustness in a moment. All right, so let's do that. Let's actually look at how to respond to mosquitoes, how to respond to tolerations, incompletions, and repeats. So what's the plan? So if you've got mosquitoes in your backyard, you call Mr. Mosquito. At least we do in our area. There's this company called Mr. Mosquito, and he comes out and does some things. I don't know what he does, but he does something, and that something is meant to actually eliminate the mosquitoes from showing up. So how are we going to think about these species of mosquitoes that we want to take on? So the first one is your tolerations. And this is something I encourage my clients to do, and I'm going to encourage you to do. List your tolerations. Actually create a list and go, these are all the things that are annoyances to me that I put up with, that are nuisances that drain energy. And they may be 5 minutes here and 2 minutes there. And the way the file cabinets created, the structure of that, with the way your folder system is created, the software you're using, the way you log into something. I don't know what it is for you. It may be the fact that you hate getting tickets for airplanes and travel, and yet you take that on, and yet that's an annoyance. That's a nuisance to you. It's really a toleration. So what I want you to do is list your tolerations. Here's my most recent one. Some things on there are managing or dealing with when people work, what time they arrive to work, what time they take breaks, those kind of things. It's not that that's not important. It's just a nuisance to me. And so that's one of the things on my list. Managing my own appointments and bookings. This includes clients, prospects, massages, dentists, eyeglasses, and the older I get, the more appointments I need to be in. So that's a particular nuisance for me. Managing my phone and inbox. I've got an inbox, and it's a secondary inbox, but it's got like 85,000 unread emails in it. Why? Because I've had that email address for 20 years, and that's where I subscribe to things. And the reality is, I don't know what to do with it, but it's a nuisance. I look at it and go, oh, what do I do with this? But I don't want to do that because it's easier for me just to ignore it. But there's so much good stuff in there that I need to sort of separate it. But it's a nuisance. Setting up flights, travel, hotels, dealing with banks, insurance, and other detail stuff like that. Home maintenance. I don't like home maintenance. It's a nuisance to me. And so what I did here was I just built a list. I built a list. So that's the first thing. And then once you have a list, then the next task is budget for their removal. And budget might be time, or it may be money so that you can hire somebody to do it for you. So the goal here is to eliminate these particular things that are constantly a nuisance. Start there, because that's the thing that's really going to drive a result for you. And one by one, knock off and eliminate these species of mosquitoes in your life, specifically the tolerations, the things that are annoying and a nuisance that just drain your energy. All right, secondly, with your incompletions, identify your incompletions. So you're going to take a list and make a second list now. And these are, what are the things that are on your to-do list somewhere? And many of us have multiple to-do lists, but what's the thing on your to-do list that you need to define? And then there's second part of that list, which is, do you have sort of this back of the head wish list that goes along with the unfinished to-do list? And what you're going to do is just identify those items as another list. Now, what I want you to do with those items is one of two things. Either A, schedule to solve them and get them done, to complete them. And those might be a project, a task, something like that. Schedule it. If it's a non-negotiable and it must be done, then schedule on your calendar. Go into your calendar from that list and put a time and date with how much time it's going to take you and get it done. That's going to be a really important thing to deal with the incompletes. Or the other option is, I want you to get them off your list. So if you've got a dream that's hovering around there and you kind of keep it hanging out there and you go, I just want to do this someday and it's really important to me, I want you to take it off the list, because you know what it does? It drains energy. If 2 years down the road you decide to put it back on your list, do so. But anything that you're not going to complete and you know you're not going to complete in the next month, get it off your list. Get it off your to-do list. Get rid of it. Remove it, outsource it, do something, but take it off your list, because incompletes. There's a great line, nothing is so fatiguing as the eternal hanging on of an uncompleted task. And I don't want that for you. I want you to be freed up to do the things you want to do. Get rid of the incompletes. It's a mosquito, but left too long, that mosquito starts dripping stress into your life, and that's not helpful. All right, repeating problems. This version is similar to toleration, so you're going to do the same thing. But ultimately, once you list it and you know what the problems that keep repeating for you, then prioritize the fix. And decide what are the non-negotiable items and actions on that list to do to stop the problem from occurring. If that means budgeting something in the way you do with your tolerations, budget to get it dealt with. Hire an outside contractor, delegate somebody on your team to get it done. Delegate time in your own schedule to get it done. Pay money to resolve it, but get it off your plate, because ultimately mosquitoes, uneliminated, have this ability to carry a serious disease. And I think, interestingly enough, the disease it carries is the inability to deal with the rodents and prepare for the black swans. So this is really important. Let's go on to rodents. I'm going to go quickly through these because they're really important, but let's process through them. First, what's the plan? How do you deal with rodents in the walls and in the ceiling, in the attic and in the basement? How do you do those? With unclear goals, I think it's really important to have a planning rhythm. And planning rhythms a lot of times are weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then yearly. That's a planning rhythm that I go through. That's a planning rhythm many of my clients go through. Is every week there's a planning format for what are we going to accomplish this week. That's very operational and transactional. Every month there's a planning meeting that is really about being clear on the goals we want to set for the upcoming month, reviewing where we were, what's happening in this upcoming month. And then quarterly, it's setting the quarterly objectives. What are we going to accomplish in the next quarter? What are some of the major initiatives we're going to take in this quarter? And then yearly is how are we doing against our strategic plan? How are we going towards our 3-year goals, our 10-year goals? That planning rhythm is really important to manage this particular rodent. As it relates to poor employees, you either have to make a commitment to train, support them, or exit them. And when it's particularly difficult in your environment, doing this is a commitment, but it's a rodent because it's also impacting culture. So if you've got an emergent culture, it's really important for you to deal with the rodent of this, the species of rodent, and make your culture explicit. That means you are explicit about your values. You're explicit about your virtues that you manage in your business and about your standards of excellence, the standards that you live by. And so explicitly explaining that, talking about it, making people aware of what's the non-negotiable around here from those values, virtues, and standards helps you to really deal with the cultural issues and may actually serve to support making poor employees better ones, or at least identifying a more important and distinct way to decide if they fit or not. Many of our employees don't have an issue so much with the tasks they're required to do. Most of the issues we have with many of our employees are actually because they don't fit our culture. And so you got to make the culture explicit, and then that supports how you deal with employees. Poor systems. You got to build better ones. You got to replace current ones. I would recommend you start with the most intense one at the beginning. That's why I put the number one here. This number one is all about just choose one at a time. You can't, if you need to replace your software, don't plan on replacing your phones. If you need to resolve a major mechanism in your business that serves you, that's a toolkit, that's equipment, those kind of things, do them one at a time. I've just seen too many people try and take on 2, 3, 4 at any given time, and it's disaster. It actually becomes a black swan. So when you're dealing with poor systems, build better systems, but do it one at a time. Lack of quality standards, you got to define and implement them. I mean, it seems so obvious, but if you don't have a quality standard around how you deliver service, then how can anybody know how to deliver that? Lack of operating plans, you got to make SOPs, standard operating procedures, for all the major tasks of your business. And if they're complicated and complex, just like a pilot who gets on a plane on a plane doesn't have to know everything, but they have to have a checklist they go through. Great book on that is Checklist Manifesto. I think it's worth the read because it shows how in the hospital system and in the medical system, how checklists have radically changed the death rate in operating rooms. So SOPs, which are built out processes, which are clear and defined, and then for those more complex ones, building checklists to ensure that operating system, that operating plan is actually implemented. And then lack of performance measures, implement a scorecard. I think a lot of us tend to think in terms of, well, let's look at the P&L and implement that. That's the one that most of us work from. But what about implementing scorecards in terms of expected performance related to key performance indicators, either in the marketing sales part of your business, the operations part of the business, or the admin and finance? Your P&L is like a lagging indicator. It's after everything's done. But what about setting up scorecards to support performance measures that need to be done as a leading indicator? So are we getting enough leads? Are we getting enough opportunities to quote people? Are we getting enough sales opportunities? All of that kind of stuff. How are we delivering our service? How long does it take to answer the phone? These are the kind of things that become performance measurements. And so implementing those really serves to eradicate the vermin that are left unattended. Now, like I said earlier, we all have some of these that we do really well on. So the goal here is to define which of the species of vermin and rodents that we're particularly dealing with, and what are we going to do to respond to that. Finally, black swans. You got to be prepared for these too. So what are the species? Let's look at the plan. The plan for black swans related to natural disasters is a disaster preparedness and a disaster recovery plan. I am somewhat amazed at how many businesses that have a significant amount of revenue flowing through them and are an active small to mid-sized business have no disaster preparedness or no disaster recovery plan. And I'm not talking about a digital one. I'm talking about for your whole business. What happens if? Who do we call if? How do we deal if we have a fire? What happens if we have a flood outside our door? All of those kind of things that people are now experiencing on a regular basis. It's your job to prepare for them. As an owner, as a CEO, as an executive, as a manager, it's your job to ensure that you've kind of got a plan to deal with a natural disaster. With economic issues, I've talked about this before and in some of my financial videos, but it's really important that you have in your business a minimum of 2 to 3 months, and I would encourage more if possible, but 2 to 3 months of capital reserves held in a bank account that you cannot access. Those capital reserves, 2 to 3 months of operating expenses. So if you got zero income for 2 to 3 months, that reserve is meant to pay for all operating expenses to keep you liquid and capable for 2 to 3 months. That is critically important to deal with economic issues. It's really interesting to me that in the U.S., when the PPP loan came out during the COVID pandemic, that figure, the calculation on that was roughly 2 months of operating expense. So if you calculated it out, it often panned out to be around 2 months. You want to do it such that you have that in capital reserves and not expect help from somebody else for that. All right, security breach. Breaches happen. They're happening more and more. There is an entire infrastructure in the world dedicated to breaking into companies, small and large. And so do you have a breach response plan? Do you have regular ongoing, not just a response, but do you have ongoing ways to test your security of your digital infrastructure, of your computer, your networks? Make sure you've got that. If it's a physical environment, do you have a security plan around that? A breach response plan that's more physical, less digital. It's your job to be prepared for that. On accidents, do you have risk mitigation? Have you thought about what happens if we have this kind of accident? What about that kind of accident? Your business is relatively consistent and stable in terms of what you do. Have you actually sat down and considered what are the potential accidents we could run into, and what's our response strategy? What's our mitigation strategy? And do we have insurance to cover that? This relates to your plan up here. It's related to that, but it's slightly different. All right, what about an unplanned death of a principal, of a owner? Do you have any succession planning in place? I am amazed a lot of times in the conversations I have with owners of businesses that have not dealt with their potential demise. What happens if I die? And so often when I do coaching with somebody, I spend a lot of time at the beginning of our coaching agreement working on this question: what happens if you leave the building in an unplanned way? Major sickness, unplanned death. You may or may not know, I went through a major crisis 5 years ago where I had stage 3B rectal cancer, and that threw my whole world into a complete and utter unknown. And I realized at that point that I had done some of the work, but I hadn't done all of the work. So succession planning, what happens if I leave my company, if I'm the only shareholder, if I'm a partner, do I have agreements and ways to manage that thing from a succession planning perspective? And then finally, if you lose a key person in your business, you need to be sure that that person who holds the keys, literal keys to your kingdom, if you were to lose them through the same thing, an unplanned death, a sickness, an illness, or for some strange reason they decided to go elsewhere, do you have a plan to deal with that for them? So are you cross-training? Are you getting all the information that's in their head in some kind of documented format? This can literally take months to do, or do you have some kind of succession plan for them? I'm telling you that because these are black swan events. These species of black swans have the potential to completely take out your business. And so while the mosquitoes seem like the easy thing, if you're not also spending time and energy on these, and frankly, I'm guessing that some of you have a lot of these dealt with, but I'm guessing once I actually explain these, you automatically know which of the black swan species is the one that you have not done the work on. And so it's your job to do the work on those. All right, here we go. Mosquitoes, rodents, black swans. A lot of times when you get to this point, we've just decided and discussed what they all are, and you kind of know what the species are and the variations. My guess is you may go, oh man, I got to deal with stuff in every particular category. Let me give you just a simple clue. Start here and move across, right? So if you can get rid of 30 minutes of mosquitoes a day by doing what we talked about, eliminating those mosquitoes, you're freed up to go here, right, into the rodents. And you're going to pick the one major category that you're dealing with rodents and get that resolved. Start with one over here. So you're going to do just one, and free up over here as many as you can on this list. Remember I said write a list. Write that list, free up as many as you can. Take all of those mosquitoes, as many mosquitoes off your list as you can, and then come back every quarter and relook at your mosquitoes. And then finally, once you've resolved some of these, then you're going to dig into and make this a quarterly project where your primary focus is to take one of those black swan species and eliminate it, create this capability to withstand the potential black swan event, or in some cases to exploit it. And by exploit, I mean the economic ones, the disaster kind of ones. A lot of times in those kind of situations, you can do something with it. I know that's a big topic, and I've tried to do it as quickly as I can, but I'm telling you, if you can work on your mosquitoes, your rodents, and your black swans, and you can do it in the order I just talked about, I think you're going to find a lot of freedom, and you're going to find a lot of stability in your business. And in doing so, you're freed up to actually deal with what comes at you. I hope that helps. We'll talk soon.